Jean Charest is the chair of the Aerospace Industries Association of Canada's Vision 2025, and he joins me now. Mr. Charest, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David.
You're looking for help here from the federal government. Is there a specific number you're asking for, or is this something you'd like to sit down and negotiate with them?
There's no specific number. The ask is one that we've been making for a long time now. Over a year ago, I delivered a report before the federal campaign, and one of the main things that the industry needs is a sector-specific strategy, which is not the case now, and which almost all the other countries with whom we compete, David, do have. And the reason why we're speaking up today is that coming out of this crisis, and we fully understand the demand on public funds, the deficit, and the debt, as we move from programs that have been put out there to sustain Canadians into programs to stimulate the economy and pay down that debt, we feel that it's extremely important that there be a strategy that's specific to the aerospace industry, as it is in other countries. Other countries have done that as we speak. And if we don't move rapidly, we're going to continue to lose ground relative to our competition.
Right. I think we've seen the United States, for example, has given about $50 billion to its air industry sector to try to keep it afloat. I believe John McKenna, who's part of this movement with you, said you'd be happy with about 10% of that. I know that's not an ask for $5 billion, but when you're looking for help, like, what are the components of the help you would be looking for?
And there's two parts to this, David. John McKenna represents the Airlines. Mm-hmm. Now, the Airlines is Air Canada and WestJet and all those companies. And the group I represent are the aerospace space industry, which includes satellites and the Canada arm and the space part, but also all the big companies, where Canada is actually one of the biggest producers in the aerospace industry in the world. It's advanced manufacturing. So there's a number of things. A sector-specific strategy. What we're looking for is support in research and development, as the French are doing. The French have put forward a $26 billion program now. Stimulate research and development. Also, support for small and medium-sized enterprises who need to modernize, digitalize, all those things. On the defense side, we need a procurement that is going to be very open to small and medium-sized businesses also. All these things put together can make up for one important strategy for the sector, which will allow us to survive but also thrive, create jobs, wealth, help pay down the debt.
So are you looking for like grants or direct investments, or would credit facilities and loans be good enough for the sector?
Well, one of the main tools that the sector has benefited from over the last few years has been loans with royalties. And when I was Premier of Quebec, David, that's what we did in Quebec, loans with royalties. And
so how does that work as opposed to a loan with interest?
You lend money to the company, they sell a plane, they get a royalty, right, and you get paid back. They pay back the loan plus a profit. That's one of the methods that has been used that has been very profitable for the taxpayer. So that's part of it. There's something called ITBs. ITBs are commitments that foreign companies make to Canada when they get a defense contract to invest in Canada. There's money in that account that can be used for the purpose of stimulating the industry. And then there's research and development. We spend $1.4 billion a year on R&D. The aerospace industry in Canada, David, is one of the biggest spenders of private research and development in the country. It's 215,000 very well-paid jobs in Ontario, as in Quebec, in Alberta, British Columbia, everywhere. And so the idea here is let's accelerate R&D. Let's accelerate defense spending and have some fallout for small and medium-sized businesses. Yes, you can have grant programs. Yes, you can have loans. All these things need to be part of a sector-specific package. And if we do that, we'll be able to compete with other countries. The alternative, just to be clear, is that a lot of Canadian companies are being asked as we speak to move elsewhere. In the United States, for example, every day these companies, every week, literally, these companies get requests to move their business elsewhere because 80% of what we produce is exported anyway to the United States and the rest of the world.
Right. So to this point, the government has not done sector-specific bailouts. It's focused on broadly applied things like wage subsidies, credit facilities, or like the large employer emergency financing facility, what's called LEAF. Why isn't that good enough for this sector?
Well, first of all, these programs were designed for the phase of survival in the economy to keep our head above water, and they're good, and a lot of our companies have benefited from them, but they're not specific. They're not tailor-made to the industry. That's the first part about these programs. And what other countries have done, Germany, France, Europe, Asian countries, is that they've gone to the second generation, phase 2 of programs to stimulate the sector. The other thing you have to keep in mind, David, and the government recognizes this, everyone's affected. Everyone's affected negatively. But the aerospace industry and the airline industry are affected more than the average, more rapidly, and it's going to be tougher for us to come out of this crisis than other sectors. That is specific to our industry, and the government, we feel, needs to recognize that if we're going to be able to contribute to getting the country back on its feet when this economy will pick up.
But to this point, there has been no real indications from Ottawa of sector-specific programs. No. I was going to say, I doubt you would have gone as public as you did today if you're getting strong indications from the federal government that something was coming. So what is your sense that they might heed your calls for help here?
Well, we think we need to make this call. We need to make it public. We need to make this a public issue so that the government understands the importance of it. The unions involved are going to do the same thing, and they're going to call on the government, because otherwise there is a very high, we need to make everyone conscious that there's a very high risk that Canada is going to lose an extraordinary industrial asset if we're not very careful about what we do. And in Canada, David, we're not like the States in Europe. We don't have defense spending that is used for the purpose of fueling the civil part of the industry, the R&D. We don't have that, so we need government support, as do all countries that have an aerospace industry. And another indication of that is that the government put together some groups, outside groups, to help give them advice on what to do, but the aerospace industry is not represented specifically in those groups. So we feel we need to send our own signal at this point and say to the government, we need your help, and if you don't come forward, then you're playing a very risky game of losing an asset for this country that is one of the key industrial assets we have.
But Mr. Charest, you've got a lot of Canadians who are upset at the airlines in particular for not getting tickets refunded that they're unable to use. We've seen bailouts for companies like Bombardier over the years. When you look at the big debt numbers and the big deficit numbers we saw this week, what kind of an appetite do you think there is for the Canadian taxpayer to do this?
We're very conscious of the deficit and the debt numbers, and other countries are experiencing the same thing, and a lot of them have a bigger deficit and debt than we do, and yet they've gone ahead and they've put forward programs to accelerate the development, help the industry get back on its feet. And why have they done that, David? Because this industry generates wealth for the country, profits, taxes. There are 215,000 very good, well-paying jobs in Canada in this industry now, concentrated in good part, both in Ontario and in Quebec, but also in British Columbia, that has a lot of momentum in the industry, in Nova Scotia, in the Atlantic, everywhere. So that's why we feel it's important for us to come out today and say to the Government of Canada that we're ready to move, and we need them. We need their support to be able to move to the next stage. Remember, these companies also, take a company like Mitsubishi, Airbus, they work in jurisdictions all over the world. They compare which countries support the industry and don't. And in this respect, Canada doesn't look very good. It's as though Canada and the federal government is missing in action.
Okay, Jean Charest, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.